So back to Angular, let's connect Angular and fetch the posts from there. And I want to do that in the posts service here in get posts. In get posts, I want to reach out to my backend, fetch the posts, store them in posts here, and then fire my update listener to inform everyone interested in my app, for now the post list component, that we got new posts. So I kick this off in post list component and I handle the response, but actually in two separate parts, which makes sense because fetching the posts is an asynchronous task. It will take a couple of seconds or milliseconds. So in get post, I want to send an HTTP request. And sending HTTP requests, thankfully, is very easy with Angular because it has a built-in HTTP client. To use that client, we need to unlock it first, and we do unlock things in the app module. There, we need to import something from the Angular package. I'll import my HTTP client from @Angular common HTTP. That is the package path you want to use. Now, actually, we have to import the HTTP client module here, excuse me. So with the HTTP client module imported in the app module, we have to add it to the imports array to really unlock this feature. And now we can use that HTTP client in our components or services. And yes, we could use it directly here in that component, but I want to centralize this task in my service. It's not directly related to the template or to the UI of that specific component. We maybe want to use it in other parts of the app too, so centralizing such HTTP calls in services makes a lot of sense. Now, to use this in this post service, we need to inject the Angular HTTP client into the service. And that's important to know. You can inject things into services too, not just in components. And you inject by using the constructor here too, because it is a normal class after all. And we want to inject that HTTP client, so we need to import it first. So let's add an import statement and import HTTP client from @Angular common HTTP, like this. Now we're importing that. Now we can inject it, and I will already and automatically bind it to a private property by adding the private keyword. I'll name it HTTP, but you could name it HTTP client, whatever you want. Important is the type. This allows Angular to find out what we want as an argument here, and the type is the HTTP client we just imported. Now we can use it in get posts, and I will remove the return statement for now. Here, I will use this local HTTP property, this HTTP, and as you can see, we got a couple of methods there for sending a GET request, a POST request. Now here, we want to use a GET request. By the way, on our Express backend, we haven't specified that we only handle GET requests here. This is something we'll add later. But a GET request does reach this route, as we could verify in the browser, because we send GET requests by default if we enter a URL there. And therefore, let's send a GET request from the Angular app too, with the GET method. Now, this GET method expects a path to our backend, to our server. So here, we simply enter http:/localhost 3000, and I will show you how to easily replace this with a more dynamic solution later in the course, /API/posts. So exactly the path we're targeting here in the browser. You can, of course, also copy it from there and simply enter it here. Now, this alone won't do anything though. The Angular HTTP client uses observables. You remember? You learned about them in the last course module. And it especially uses an observable which won't do anything, and it won't even send the request which it wraps if you don't listen to it. Because if you're not interested in the response, why would it send the request? Now, to listen, you need to, well, subscribe. And now here's one other piece of information. You don't need to store that subscription and unsubscribe from it in ng on destroy. This would be available on services too, by the way. But you don't need to do that because for observables connected to features built into Angular, like the HTTP client, this unsubscription will be handled for you by Angular. So here we subscribe, and we can pass 3 arguments here. The first one for new data, the second one for errors, and the third one when it completes. Now, we're interested in new data, which will be the response, And we probably also want to add error handling, though we will do that later in the course. For now, let's focus on the positive case. Let's add a function that gets executed whenever we got a response. And in this function, we will actually get back the body of this response already. The Angular HTTP client will give us access to this body immediately. If you want a different behavior, you can change this, and you can learn more about the in-depth features of that HTTP client in my complete guide, for example. Now, the GET request, or the GET method here, is a generic method actually, and we can clearly specify which type of value we will get back. For example, an post array, though that would be wrong, because if you take a closer look at your backend, the body of the response will be this object. So actually, we will get back an object which has a message property, which is of type string, and which has a posts property, which is of type posts array. But we can specify that here too. We'll get back an object with a message property that has a string value and a posts property that is a list of posts. Just one important addition. The posts definition, the model changed a bit. On the backend, our posts also have an ID, so maybe we should also add this to our frontend model. There, I now add an ID field like that. This means that when we're creating a new post down there, we're missing this. I'll simply fix this by setting ID null there. Because we have no ID, it wasn't generated on the server yet, I will therefore just add an empty ID. But we'll come back to posting posts to the server later, back to getting posts. Now we defined which format our data will have, and this helps us because now here, where we get our post data, we actually get TypeScript support and IDE support. And for example, my IDE knows that we have a message and a posts property on the response data. I'm interested in the posts, and I actually want to store them in my posts variable here. So we can say this posts equal to the posts we're fetching from the post data. No need to duplicate this, by the way. It's coming from the server. We can't accidentally change it on the server. There is no such connection. It was part of a HTTP response. So now we're setting the posts to the posts coming from the server. We can do this because we know that they will have the exact same format and structure. Now, if you're wondering what happens with the JSON thing, it was JSON format. Don't we need to change that back to JavaScript? Well, this is done for us by the GET method already, so it extracts and formats the data. And we can now just assign it like this. Now, there's one other thing we need to do. We need to inform our app and the other parts of our app about this update. So I will call this posts updated next, and here I will pass a copy of this posts for the same reasons as before, so that we can't edit our posts in the service. Now we should have an app that actually works. The one problem we have is that, we see it down there, get posts now doesn't return anything, but in the past in post list, we actually expected to get back posts. Well, we can simply change this now. We weren't getting back posts anyways, and now we simply just trigger that HTTP request whenever post list component is loaded, and that of course means that for now we can only fetch new posts if we reload the page, but we'll also change this later. But we'll trigger this HTTP request, and since we have the subscription, we should also be able to render the posts once they're there. So now let's save this again and recompile, and now let's try this out by visiting our Angular app again. So now not localhost 3000, but localhost 4200. Here, we don't actually see anything. Now, this actually is related to an error we can see if we open the developer tools. No access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. Now, what's that all about?